Hey everybody. Well, welcome to The Big Project. The Big Project is called The Big Project because 4 classes are working on it. Miss Newman's kindergarten class, my 1st and 2nd grade class, Miss Taylor's 4th grade class, and Miss Wagner's 5th grade class are all working on The Big Project. And today's the first day. And I wanted to tell you what The Big Project's going to be like so you know what to expect. So part 1 of The Big Project is us going to be learning about the topic of migration. So we're going to be studying the topic of migration, and I'm going to be reading to you from a book about migration and talking with you about migration. And each time we have a lesson, we will talk about a different kind of migration. And then we will do a small art project just right after the video lesson that goes with the idea of migration. And then the following week, after all of our 4 classes have watched the video and done the small art project, we're going to do what's called an art installation, which is a really big piece of art that goes inside a building somewhere. We're basically going to have a huge cutting party where we're going to cut out a whole bunch of stuff and stick it on the walls of our school out in the hall where everyone can see it, so that everyone can see an art project about migration. It'll look like a bunch of animals are migrating. And we're going to do this 3 times. We're going to do 3 lessons about migration, and we're going to do 3 big installations in the hallways, as well as 3 smaller art projects that you're just doing in your classroom. Phase 2 of the project is we're going to make animated movies. We are going to continue our study of migration by making animated movies about animals migrating and filming those movies and showing them. Here's a little animated movie I made in my kitchen. What I did is I just got some kitchen stuff out and I made it look like an animal, and then I animated it crawling across the counter and eating a bug made out of a couple of pennies. Take a look. Cool, huh? Yeah, so that's the kind of thing we'll be doing. We'll be doing an animation where you make something, move it a little bit, film it, move it a little bit, film it, move it a little bit, film it, until we get an animation movie. So that's part 2 of the project. Part 3 of the project you'll be doing with Mr. Palmer. He's going to work with all of our classes to make the music to go with our animated movies so that they will have music in them just like real movies have music behind them. And then part 4 of the project is we are going to show our animated movies in a movie theater. Yeah, we're going to take a field trip to a real movie theater and we're going to watch our animated movies up on the big screen in the movie theater. It should be totally cool. We're also going to film ourselves working on the big project. There's going to be kids helping me film the work we're doing in all 4 classes. It'll be kids from Miss Taylor's class and kids from Miss Wagner's class who will be using the same camera I'm using to film myself right now. They'll be filming you guys working on the project. And when they're filming you, you can't look at the camera. You can't be like, hey, they're filming me. You just got to do your work. And because I can only use video of people who look like they're working. If it looks like you're not working, I'm not going to put it in the movie because that would spoil it. So yeah, it's going to be a movie. The movie we go to see in the theater is going to be a movie about our project, showing us making the project, doing the installations, doing the art projects, and making the animated movies. And it's going to have the animated movies that you made as part of it too. So it's going to be kind of a long movie. Yeah, I'm hoping for about 45 minutes to an hour. So today is the first day of the big project, and we are going to read a book about animal migration. So let's do that. Okay, so this book is all about animal migration, and it's got a section of, it's got different sections about different sorts of animal migration. Land animals, water animals, and animals that live in the air. Today we're going to look at land animal migration, so we're going to read about that part. So let's get started. Migrating animals on land. And if you look at this picture, you can see a whole lot of animals in Africa. And it says about 1.5 million gnus, a type of antelope, and 500,000 zebras migrate each year in Africa. That's a lot of animals migrating. That's why we're doing the installations in the hallway, where we're going to cut out a whole bunch. We're going to cut out a whole bunch of little animals and like tape them into a long line in the hall, because we want people who see it to be like, whoa, look at all these animals, because we want to give them the feeling of, wow, these big groups of animals migrate. Let's read more. Can you imagine 2 million gnus and zebras taking a very, very long walk? Think about all those animals together and the noise from their hooves. Every fall, that is exactly what gnus and zebras do. They leave their home in Kenya, Africa, and migrate south. They go away for many months. In the spring, they walk back north. They travel 1,800 miles in all. There are many dangers along the way. If an animal falls, it could be trampled, meaning it could get stepped on by all those other animals because they're moving pretty fast in this big pack. Or a predator, such as a lion or a crocodile, could attack. So why do the gnus and zebras migrate? They're looking for food and water. These animals eat grass. There's none left where they live. The ground is dry. There's no fresh water to drink. It begins to rain in the fall. Where it rains, grass will soon grow, so the animals follow the rain. They go south to Tanzania. They walk across an area that has sweet, fresh grass and cool water. This map here shows the path that they migrate on from the southern part of Kenya at the top of the map there to the southern part of the Serengeti National Park. They go in like a big circle throughout the year, following the good grass. The gnus and zebras eat and eat. Many baby gnus are born in Tanzania. They grow quickly and are ready to migrate north with the others in the spring. By the time the gnus and zebras get back to Kenya, there's new grass and water there. The animals will stay until the food is gone and the rains start again. Far across the world, fall is also when caribou leave their homes. A caribou is a large deer. Caribou are also known as reindeer. The caribou of Alaska in the United States and parts of Canada spend summer near the Arctic Circle. But in the fall, the temperature drops. It gets very cold. A lot of snow falls. The snow covers the grass. The caribou can't get to the grass. They must leave or they will starve and freeze to death. During summer, caribou live solitary lives. But during the fall migration, up to 100,000 will travel south together. Caribou try to stay safe from wolves. They must swim through cold, strong rivers. They must be careful not to fall on the ice and break a leg. You can really see how this is dangerous. Like in the one, when they were talking about zebras and the gnus, they talked about how they could get injured when they're migrating also. So migration is important because you have to move to get food, but it's also dangerous because while you're moving, something bad could happen. The caribou will spend winter in forests below the Arctic Circle. In June, pregnant females will head north first. They will give birth back in the Arctic. It's warm there again with plenty to eat, and there are no wolves to threaten them or their young. Caribou face dangers to make sure their babies are born in a safe place. So do the red crabs of Christmas Island near Australia. Every November, 50 million crabs migrate to mate and lay their eggs. The crabs travel from the forest to the beach. There they mate. Then the females will release their eggs in the ocean. Each crab is about the size of a dinner plate. Yeah, so they're like this big. Millions of them, this big. They normally do not move very much or go very far, but during mating season, the crabs crawl for 10 days or more. They cross roads and crawl through buildings. I'm not sure how I'd feel about that if I was here teaching school and suddenly a bunch of crabs the size of dinner plates just crawled right through the school on their way to the beach. Sounds a little scary, actually. This is dangerous for the crabs, but the biggest danger comes from ants called yellow crazy ants. These ants attack crabs. They're defending their territory. When the ants attack, they spray acid. If the spray gets in a crab's eyes, the crab can get confused and die. It doesn't sound to me like the ants are eating the crabs or anything. It sounds like the ants are kind of scared of the crabs and just trying to protect their homes. Each female crab lays up to 100,000 eggs in the sea. Yeah, that's millions of crabs laying 100,000 eggs in the sea. It's going to be a lot of baby crabs. Then the crabs leave. The eggs hatch quickly. The baby crabs grow in the sea for a month. Then they come to shore and begin to crawl to the forest. They will finish growing there. And someday the baby crabs will migrate to the shore to have their own babies. So it sounds like two migrations. grown-up crabs going to the beach, and then the baby crabs coming back. And you can see here the crabs hanging out on the beach. These are either the grown-up crabs getting to the beach or the baby crabs leaving the sea and heading off to live the rest of their lives in the forest. Wow, that's pretty fascinating. Okay, so that's talking about animals, the migration of some different kinds of animals that live on land. And now you're going to draw some of those animals. And you have to pick one that you're gonna draw. You could pick the zebras, which, you know, look like horses with stripes. You can pick the gnus, which look like antelopes, a kind of deer. You could pick the caribou, which also are a kind of deer. Or you could pick the crabs. And we're gonna make a drawing, and because it's about migration, we're gonna make a drawing that has a lot of stuff in it, because in these migration stories, we're gonna see that part of migration is that a lot of animals do it. If just one animal is going somewhere, they don't really call it migration. It's just an animal traveling. It's when these big groups of animals are going places, sometimes all together or sometimes all at the same time. Maybe not all together, but all at about the same time. That's when it's called a migration. So we're gonna make a small piece of art, but it's gonna have a lot of somethings in it. I'll show you what I mean. The word that artists like to use if they are an artist who likes to make art that has the same thing happening over and over again is repetition. And you can kind of see the word repeat in there. Repetition means repeating something a lot. And I'm going to show you some works by 3 famous artists who are known for really enjoying repetition, for repeating some kind of image over and over again. And then you're going to get to make a piece of art where you're repeating an animal over and over and over again. So let's take a look at these different artists and what they did. This is an artist named M.C. Escher, and he really loved making art that kind of tricked the eye or did some kind of illusion, and he was a big fan of repetition. This piece is called Smaller and Smaller, and you can totally see why it's called that. You can see he's made these lizards, and he's made them in such a careful way that they all kind of lock together like puzzle pieces. And as they go into the middle of the page, they get smaller and smaller. So the ones on the outside edge of the page are bigger, but the ones in the middle of the page are itty bitty bitty until you probably can't even tell they're lizards anymore. So this is one of your choices. You could pick one of those animals that we read about, one of the migrating animals, and you could draw them on the outside of your paper bigger, and then you can make them getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as they go into the middle. Like M.C. Escher did. This next artist is a woman named Annie Albers, and you can see she is repeating shapes. This is completely covered with triangle-like shapes in different orientations. And by orientations, I mean some of them go like this, some of them are sideways, some of them are upside down. So you've got these different orientations of the triangles. And so this is another one of your choices. You could decide, well, instead of making the animal big on the outside and getting smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes in, you can make an animal, and you could just make the animal the same size, but change its orientation. Make it look different as it goes to each different spot on the paper. So that's another one of your choices. So you've got M.C. Escher, who started big and went smaller and smaller, and you've got Annie Albers, who's basically, she's not changing the size of these things, she's changing their orientation to make a totally cool looking design. Another artist who is really famous for repetition is Andy Warhol. Hey, my first name's Andy too. Andy Warhol loved to make paintings of the same thing over and over again. And he especially loved doing it with things that people knew really well. This painting of soup cans, the reason he picked the soup can is because it's so just plain. I mean, it's just a soup can, right? He wasn't trying to pick something fabulous and beautiful. He was on purpose making a piece of art out of something mundane. The word mundane means just kind of normal, everyday, plain. And what made it cool was that he would repeat them over and over and over and over and over again. So he took a mundane thing and made it special by repeating it over and over again. And you can see he's not changing the size of these soup cans. They're all absolutely identical. And that's important. The names change. They're not perfectly identical, but their size isn't changing. The orientation isn't changing. He's just boom, 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 all in a nice arrangement. And that's The other choice you have today is you can take the animal you've picked and you can just try to draw perfect repetitions of that animal. Just boom, 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 boom. All the same size, all the same color, like that. And you can also sort of mix these up. Like you could decide, well, I'm going to do it like Andy Warhol, but I'm going to change the colors. Or I'm going to do it like Andy Warhol, except I'm sometimes going to change the orientation and turn one sideways. Or I'm going to do like a mix of Andy Warhol and MC Escher, where I'm going to start big and get small, but they're all going to be the exact same thing. Or you could mix them all together and start big, get small, make them all the same thing, but change their orientation. You don't have to do it exactly like one of these guys, but these are our inspirations for the art you're going to make today, is taking the idea of MC Escher, that big going to small, the idea of Annie Albers, which is changing the orientation of your repeated object, or the idea of Andy Warhol, which is just repeating it exactly the same. The only rule is you have to pick one animal and you have to stick with it, right? You can't do caribou crab or caribou deer or crab and one of the other animals. You got to pick your animal. You got to say, I'm going to do a zebra and it's going to be nothing but zebras. Or I'm going to do crabs. It's going to be nothing but crabs. Let me show you some ones that I made.
So here's the first one I made. I tried to make it in the style of Andy Warhol. So I tried to draw zebras and I tried to make them as exactly the same as I could. It's pretty hard to draw them exactly the same. I just kept looking back at that first one and trying to copy it. But then I found that what I was really doing was looking at the one I'd done just before it and copying that. So they changed a little bit as they go along. But I tried to make them all the same. And I also ran out of room at the bottom of the paper. So those zebras at the bottom of the paper, I had to just draw part of them, which is okay. You can have stuff go off the page. In fact, now looking at it, I kind of wish I showed just like the tail of the next zebra after those guys, so that you could, so it looked like there were more zebras off the page. This next one I was trying to do in the style of Annie Albers, where I was drawing a reindeer. Do you see the reindeer? And I was changing its orientation. So sometimes I was turning it sideways. Sometimes I was turning it upside down. Sometimes I was flipping it, making it go backwards. And so if you look really close, you can see the forelegs and the feet and the body and the head and the horns up there. But you know, what's cool about this is that by putting them all together like that and changing their orientation, when you first look at it, it just looks like a bunch of shapes and colors. But the longer you look at it, the more you can see the different reindeer with their eyes and their horns. I like this one a lot. This one turned out really nicely, I think. I feel pretty good about it. I like how some of the reindeer legs and heads are just sticking off the edge of the page. Like they go right off. I feel like this one worked out a little better than my zebra one. For my last one, I decided to do the crabs, and you can see what I'm doing. I'm trying to be like MC Escher. I started on top there with a big crab, and got a little smaller, 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 until finally they got so small I couldn't make them any smaller. It was fun drawing the crabs, and I like how they look getting smaller and smaller. I wish I had planned it a little more carefully so that there wasn't that big white space in the middle. I thought I'd just try to make the crabs smaller and smaller, but the marker just can't make a dot smaller than that. So I probably could have made the first crabs even bigger, and it still would have worked. Just like a huge crab for that first one, and then gotten smaller and smaller until it was just little dots. Another thing I could have done is I could have started in the middle with the small crabs, with the teeniest crab, and gotten bigger and bigger. That would have worked out really nicely, and I could have just had the crabs go off the page. So maybe if I do this one again, I would start with the small crab and go big instead of start big and go small. But you know, this is my first time. You can use these ideas if you want to. So the plan is now that you are going to get to draw, pick one of the animals that was in that migration book and try to make a drawing of it using one of the ideas from these different artists. And if you finish one and your teacher lets you have the time, you could do more. Yeah, so just try your best, see how it goes. If it doesn't work, try again. If it does work, try again, as much as your teacher lets you try. And I look forward to seeing what you make, and I'll see you at the next lesson.